Welcome back, or welcome to another episode of the Success Times Happiness podcast. I am your host, Richard Thompson. This episode's a little bit different. It's a solo episode, so I apologize in advance for that, but a little bit different. Usually, or every single episode we've done, Cody is in the background, in the room, fiddling with sound and audio and also the cameras. But tonight it's a little bit different. The studio at the moment is at my house, and tonight I have my 3 boys asleep upstairs. So he's ducked out, to make sure that none of them wake up whilst I'm recording. So it's just me. It feels quite odd not having him in the room. Anyway, a little bit of a topic today about self-discipline. And this is spurred on from the fact that there's Stephen Bartlett, The Diary of a CEO, has released a book, which is, a really, really insightful read. And every guest that we have on, we always ask about what their favorite book is or what their most gifted book. And so I'm an avid reader, and this book has really pricked up my ears in terms of how good the content is. And there's a particular element about this success piece and how important self-discipline is. And I think with everybody we know, or I know, or even you know, and even ourselves, that we've been very successful or somewhat successful in specific areas of our lives. But then obviously the vast majority of us haven't felt or achieved that success in other areas of our life. And so that gets you thinking as to that, well, you've got the toolkit inside of you to achieve success. So you're not trying to reinvent the wheel, but it's trying to understand why you can't be successful in all, or as successful in all areas of your life. And maybe you are the person who's successful in everything, and that's brilliant. You've tapped into it. But I think one key element here is this aspect of self-discipline. So in researching for this episode, I came across this Forbes article, which starts off by saying, there are many important qualities that can contribute to a person's achievements and happiness, which again, obviously this podcast is all about achievement and happiness. But it goes on to say there is only one that begets sustainable long-term success in all aspects of life, and that is self-discipline. It references a study in 2013 by Willem Hoffman to state that came to the conclusion that people with high self-control are happier than those without. The study discovered this is true because the self-disciplined subjects were more capable of dealing with goal conflicts. These people spent less time debating whether to indulge in behaviors detrimental to their health and were able to make positive decisions more easily. The self-disciplined did not allow their choices to be dictated by impulses or feelings. Instead, they made informed, rational decisions on a daily basis without feeling overly stressed or upset. That's all great. It set it up really nicely. And then the article goes on, I think, over a cliff. And it basically says, it ends up by saying discipline is a learned behavior, right? Which is so key to this whole concept that anyone can learn to be more disciplined. You're not born with it. But yeah, the article then just goes off the cliff, unfortunately. It gives a clickbaity 5 best ways to be self-disciplined, and not necessarily helpful. But the Stephen Bartlett commentary about self-discipline is what I really want to touch on. And I think it comes back to the underlying philosophy that I think as a species, we overestimate what we think we can achieve in 6 months or 3 months or a week, and dreadfully understate or undervalue what we can actually achieve in 5 years, 7 years. And my own experience lends that self 100%. I started triathlon, in the sport, started triathlon as a terribly unfit 17-year-old, and in 7 years from there, within 7 years, became junior Ironman world champion. That's just a sample size of one, but I think also it relates to business, it relates to everything. That, I think speaking to people, you ask, what would you like to achieve if success was guaranteed? And they laugh and go, well, I'd do this or that or whatever. But the reality is, if you put yourself out there and put everything into it for 5 or 7 years, you'd achieve that without question. But a critical element to that journey is self-discipline. And so Stephen Bartlett talks about this formula about self-discipline, and that's what I want to talk to tonight. So he says that whether or not an action is done, so whether or not you do something, comes down to the discipline equation. And he says that whether or not you do it is an equation that looks like this: the importance of the goal to you plus the psychological enjoyment you get from the pursuit of that goal minus the psychological cost of the pursuit. Definitely the why is an important aspect. Simon Sinek talks about the power of why, and certainly I'm a huge believer in that. That you've got to truly want something. And my philosophy generally is that obviously you can achieve anything you want, but you've got to want it, right? The why underneath everything is so critical. But it's not everything, because that's one part of the equation that Stevens talks about, because you've got the importance of that goal to you. What is your why? Why do you want to achieve it? Then you add on, I guess then it's the equation of, on top of that, it's how much do you enjoy doing it, the pursuit of it, minus the psychological costs of the pursuit. So if the cost of doing the goal far outweighs the enjoyment and is such a cost that it outweighs the principal why, it won't get done. Full stop. Whereas the why might be small, might be relatively small, the enjoyment factor to getting there is really high, and there isn't a huge amount of cost, then it'll get done anyway. So the why bit's important, but it's not everything. By looking at that equation, you can reverse engineer the things that you aren't achieving, or the things that you aren't attributing your self-discipline to because of that equation. So we can let's put this into a real-world scenario. Brushing your teeth, right? Which is, I always go to this because it's if someone says they lack discipline, and if they have a good oral hygiene, then they don't, right? Because they've got that toolkit. So brushing your teeth, the why to have, I guess the strong why is, I don't want my teeth to fall out. I don't want to go to the dentist in a year's time, and it's an expensive and painful painful procedures. So the why is pretty strong. The enjoyment factor of it is zero. No one really loves the process of sitting there in the mirror with two minutes and flossing and all that. But the cost is quite low as well. It's not terrible. So because the why is strong enough, that equation means it's a positive. It's in the positive, so therefore you do it. Running a marathon, for most people, you have a why that might say, oh yeah, I could do it. That'd be fun to do, say that I can do it. So not huge, let's say. The positive, you might get a lot out of the running, and it doesn't really, there's not a huge cost, therefore you get it done. If you don't get much enjoyment out of the training and it actually costs a lot of you psychologically, then you're not going to get it done because the why is not big enough. So I just love this equation, right? And you can attribute it to anything, to any action that you do in your life. And that does underpin everything that comes with success and happiness. And based on that study in 2013, that self-discipline equals happiness. And that's also in line with a lot of other psychologists in the position that if you're lacking direction, it's better off being highly self-disciplined on anything, because that will give you the strength and the purpose going forward. And so, yeah, when Stephen Bartlett brought that out on the book, I thought it was fantastic. I really wanted to share it with you. I've probably hacked the living lights out of the concept, but that's what I took away from it. And the first step is to for anyone wanting to achieve success and happiness, right? However you wish to define that, is to say, well, I want to be, I'm at A and I want to be at B. That's where I want to go, whether that's in the success or happiness or both categories. To do that, I need to be successful or to achieve something, let's call it. self-discipline's required, right? Nothing is achieved without it. And so nothing worthwhile, at least, right? And so it's then to go, okay, why can't I be self-disciplined in an area, or why am I self-disciplined in something that is in some areas, but not in the important area that I want to change, to do some significant change in my life? And that's where the formula comes in. And then the more data you get, the more you can assess that data and be really critical about it, and not just shrug your shoulders and go, oh, well, I don't have the self-discipline in this area of my life. It's like, well, why is that? And then you use that simple equation. It's y plus the enjoyment minus the cost of the pursuit, or the psychological cost of the pursuit. And you just, I guess, manipulate that formula so that you can implement the self-discipline. I hope that makes sense, and I hope one person out of everyone gets something from that, because I just think the more open and the more self-aware we are about going towards that journey of success or happiness, the better we are for it, and the more aware we are, the more likely we are to achieve. So that's about it for tonight. I will go and relieve Cody from making sure my children are still asleep. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. A little bit of change happening with the podcast coming up in the future, which I'm really excited about, and looking forward to sharing with you. And yeah, until next time, peace.